The night my neighbor told me my driveway was practically his, I laughed. I thought he was making one of those weird suburban jokes people make when they don't know how to talk to new neighbors. I had no idea that a year later, I'd be standing on that same slab of concrete holding the deed to his house while the sheriff supervised his move out. But let me back up. My name is Nina. I'm 31, and for most of my 20s I bounced between cramped apartments, dreaming about a tiny house with a little patch of grass that belonged to me. I work as a financial analyst for a regional bank in Ohio. It's not glamorous, but it meant I knew my way around mortgages, property taxes, and a spreadsheet. I also knew that if I didn't get into the market soon, I might never be able to. So when a small 2-bedroom bungalow went up for sale on a quiet dead-end street on the edge of Columbus, I pounced. It wasn't perfect. The kitchen was dated, the bathroom needed new tile, and the carpet in the living room smelled faintly of dog and divorce. But it had things I'd never had before: a fenced backyard, a tiny front porch, and this part is important, a long, wide driveway leading to a detached garage. My realtor Maria waved her arm like a game show host. "Look at all this parking," she said. "You can fit, 4 cars in here? Great for guests." I pictured summer cookouts, friends over for board games, my younger brother coming to crash during college breaks. I pictured convenience. I did not picture Todd. Todd was my next-door neighbor. He lived in the house to the right of mine, a slightly bigger ranch with peeling beige siding and a yard full of stuff, a rusty trailer, an above-ground pool that looked like it hadn't seen water since 2015, and a large, loud pickup truck. He was in his mid-40s, buzz-cut hair, perpetually sunburned neck, always in cargo shorts. The kind of guy who knew every NASCAR stat but thought Aprilaire filter change was a conspiracy. I met him the first weekend I moved in. I was wrestling a box labeled kitchen stuff out of my hatchback when he ambled over, beer in hand. "Hey there, new neighbor," he said. "Name's Todd. Been here 15 years. Nina," I said, wiping sweat off my forehead. "Nice to meet you." He nodded toward my driveway. "You got yourself a nice wide strip of concrete there," he said. "Old folks who lived here before, you know, the Martins, they always let me park my truck halfway up whenever I needed. My own driveway's a little short 'cause of the tree, so we kinda shared. Worked out great." I smiled politely, not totally following. "Oh," I said. "Well, I'll mostly just be using the garage." Yeah, he said, waving his beer like everything was settled. "Just letting you know. I'll probably still be sliding over on your side sometimes. We're neighbors, right? No big deal." I assumed he meant occasionally, like when he had a party and needed extra space. I was trying to balance friendly new neighbor with person who actually owns this property now. "Well, as long as you're not blocking the garage, it should be fine," I said. "I leave pretty early for work some days." He grinned. "Sure thing, sweetheart," he said. "We'll work it out." The word sweetheart made my jaw clench, but I let it go. I had boxes to unpack, cabinets to wipe down, and 1,000 tiny new home tasks buzzing in my brain. If I'd known what was coming, I might have pushed harder right then. But hindsight is cruel like that. The first actual problem happened a couple weeks later. It was a Tuesday. I'd been at the office all day for back-to-back budget meetings and was running late for a dinner with my friend Maya. I pulled onto my street, tired and hungry. My heart sank. Todd's massive black pickup was parked squarely across the top half of my driveway, directly in front of my garage door. There was maybe 2 feet of space between his bumper and the garage. No way my car was getting in or out. I parked on the street in front of my house, grabbed my bag, and walked over. He was sitting on his front porch, feet up on the railing, phone in hand. "Hey, Todd," I called. "Can you move your truck? I need to get into my garage." He looked over, didn't move. "We're having people over later," he said. "I'll move it when they get here. You can park on the street. It's public." "I have dinner plans now," I said. "I need to leave in 10 minutes. Can you move it, please?" He shrugged. You're going to the same place whether you walk 10 extra feet or not, he said. I'm not moving it twice. Annoyance flared. Todd, this is my driveway, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I need to be able to use it. The Martins might have let you park here, but I'm not comfortable with that. He rolled his eyes. Come on, he said. Don't be one of those people. We've been sharing this strip for years. It's not like I'm hurting anything. You're blocking my garage, I said. That's hurting something. He took a swig of beer, then smirked. It's public easement, he said. Half of that driveway's basically the street. I asked a cop once. They don't care. I care, I said. He turned back to his phone. I'll move it later, he said. You'll live. My cheeks burned. I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed it, texted Maya that I'd be late, and reverse parked skillfully around his truck out of sheer spite. When I got home that night, his truck was still there. It was there the next morning, too. I had to back carefully around it in the dark at 6:30 a.m., my bumper inches from his war shrapnel of a trailer. By noon, I'd had enough. I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. The dispatcher listened, then said, "Ma'am, is the vehicle on the public street or on your private driveway?" On my driveway, I said. Blocking my garage. Well, that's a civil matter, she said. We can't tow a vehicle from private property without the owner's permission. You'd need to contact a private towing company or take it up with your neighbor. So you can't do anything? I asked. Not unless he's blocking the street or a fire hydrant, she said. Sorry. I hung up, feeling stupid. I wrote a polite note on a sticky pad and left it on his windshield. Todd, please don't park in my driveway or block my garage. I need access at all times. Nina, when I got home from work, the sticky note was balled up on my front step. Over the next few weeks, Todd in my driveway became a recurring nightmare. Sometimes it was just the back half of his truck nudging over the invisible line between his property and mine. Other times it was fully across my concrete, sometimes with his boat trailer hitched on for extra fun. If I asked him to move it, he'd sigh dramatically, shuffle out in his socks, and mutter about uptight city girls under his breath. Other times he'd pretend not to hear me. I tried being nicer. I tried being firmer. Nothing worked. Finally, I had Maria, my realtor, forward me the property survey and photos from when I bought the house. They clearly showed the driveway was entirely on my lot. No easement. No shared anything. I printed a copy and walked over. Hey Todd, I said, holding the papers. I wanted to show you this. The driveway is actually 100% on my property, see the lines? So there's no easement. Legally, you can't park here without my permission. He glanced at the paper and snorted. I've been parking there for 15 years, he said. The Martins were fine with it. You don't get to move in and change how things work. That's literally how property ownership works, I said before I could stop myself. He stood up, looming a little. Listen, he said. You might have a fancy piece of paper, but around here we respect what's been going on, not just what some lawyer drew up. You want to be part of this neighborhood? Stop acting like you own the street. I don't want to own the street, I said, pulse pounding. I want to use my driveway. He smirked. Like I said, he repeated, call the cops. I did more research instead. Turns out, neighbor keeps parking in my driveway is an entire genre of internet misery. Reddit threads, Facebook neighborhood groups, articles with titles like how to handle entitled driveway blockers. Most advice boiled down to, talk to them, done, put up signs, call a tow company, so I went in order. I ordered 2 red and white metal signs online. Private driveway, no parking, unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. I bolted one to the fence by the driveway. The second I screwed into a wooden post near the curb. Todd watched from his porch, sipping his beer. Looks real classy, he called. Like a Walmart loading dock. I ignored him. Then I called a local towing company. The dispatcher explained that because it was private property, they could tow a car at the owner's request if there were clear signs, and I signed an authorization form. How fast can you come if someone's blocking me in? I asked. Depends, she said. Usually within 30 minutes. Good enough. The next Friday night, I put the plan into action. I had tickets to a concert with Maya downtown. I parked my car in the driveway, close to the garage, leaving ample room behind me. By the time I finished getting ready, Todd's truck was once again wedged behind me, bumper practically kissing my license plate. I took a photo. Then another from the side, showing my no parking sign. My hands were shaking when I dialed the tow company. Yes, ma'am, we'll send a truck, the woman said. 15 minutes later, a flatbed rolled up. The driver hopped out, took one look, and whistled. Guy really didn't want you going anywhere, huh, he said. You have no idea, I muttered. He checked my ID, had me sign the authorization, and got to work. By the time Todd noticed, his truck was already halfway up the ramp. He exploded out of his front door in basketball shorts and no shirt. What the hell do you think you're doing? He shouted at the tow driver. Removing an unauthorized vehicle from private property, the driver said calmly. That's my truck, Todd yelled. Then you can pick it up at the yard and pay the fee, the driver replied. Todd rounded on me. You called a tow on me? He demanded. We're neighbors. You blocked my car and after I asked you not to, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. There are signs. I warned you. This is harassment, he spat. I'll call the police. Please do, I said. I already spoke to them. They said towing from private property is between the owner and the tow company. He glared, face red. You think you're clever? He said. You have no idea who you're messing with. The tow truck drove off with his baby. I went to my concert. It felt like a win. It was for about 12 hours. Then the retaliation started. I woke up the next morning to find a long, jagged key scratch running the length of my driver's side door. My stomach dropped. There were no cameras on our street. No witnesses. I couldn't prove it was Todd. But I knew. When I knocked on his door to confront him, he opened it just enough to talk. Do you mind? He said, gesturing behind him. Some of us are trying to sleep. Someone keyed my car, I said, my voice shaking. If that was you. He shrugged. Maybe if you didn't have people coming at all hours, weird things wouldn't happen, he said. This is a safe neighborhood. Folks here look out for each other. You sure you want to be the one everyone's mad at? I reported the vandalism to the police anyway, filed an insurance claim, and installed a Ring camera pointing at my driveway. The next week, Todd started parking just off my driveway, half on the grass, half in the street, as close as possible to my car without technically blocking it. He'd rev his engine early in the morning. He'd leave his trash cans tipped over so they'd roll into my yard. He also started calling the city. First it was a complaint about my illegal no parking sign. A code enforcement officer came by, checked the text and placement and told me it was fine. Then it was a complaint about overgrown weeds along my fence line. The inspector rolled his eyes when he saw my perfectly normal backyard. Some folks weaponize this office when they're mad at neighbors, he said. Just keep doing what you're doing. I started documenting everything, photos, dates, times, videos. I kept a Google Drive folder labeled Todd Nonsense. Maya joked that I was building a case file for the Netflix documentary. Underneath the humor, though, I was tired. I'd bought this house to have peace. Instead, I was living in a low-budget feud. I considered moving. But the market was worse than when I bought this place. Selling would mean giving up my hard-won equity and starting over in a rental. Besides, a stubborn part of me rejected the idea of letting Todd win. He thought he owned the street? I'd show him what actual ownership looked like. The turning point came, oddly enough, from my job. Like I said, I work in real estate finance. Part of my role involves analyzing risk on mortgage portfolios, looking at things like property values, neighborhood trends, and, Importantly, tax delinquency. One of the tools we use is the county's public database. One slow afternoon, I pulled up the delinquent property tax list for my own curiosity. I typed in my address. Paid up. Then, almost as a joke, I typed in Todd's address. An entry popped up. Amount due, $9,740.56. Years delinquent, 3. My eyes widened. I clicked through. There it was, Todd's full name as owner, lien amounts, interest, notices sent. According to the website, if he didn't pay by the end of the year, his house was headed for a tax lien sale. I sat back in my chair, mind spinning. I knew, in theory, how tax lien sales worked. When property owners don't pay their taxes, counties can sell tax lien certificates to investors. The investor pays the tax bill. The owner then has a redemption period to pay the investor back plus interest. If they don't, in some states, the investor can eventually move to foreclose and take ownership. I'd never participated in one. My investments were boring index funds and a high-yield savings account. But now, suddenly, the abstract was sitting right next door in the form of the man who'd treated my driveway like a public parking lot. The idea felt petty. It also felt poetic. I did more research. In my county, tax lien certificates were auctioned once a year, and owners had a 1-year redemption period after the sale. If they still didn't pay, the certificate holder could apply for a tax deed, which after more legal steps could transfer ownership. It wasn't quick. It wasn't guaranteed. And it wasn't cheap. Bidding started at the amount of delinquent taxes owed. If others bid, the interest rate dropped. The lower the rate, the less return if the owner paid. If they didn't pay, though, you could eventually end up owning a house for the cost of its back taxes plus legal fees. I did some math. Todd's place, even in its shabby state, was worth at least $180,000 on the open market. His back taxes were under $10K. My savings account had more than that sitting in it as my emergency fund plus maybe future down payment on an investment property someday. Buying his tax lien would be risky. If he redeemed, I'd get my money back plus interest, a decent return, but not life-changing. If he didn't, this nightmare neighbor might end up being my tenant. Or my former neighbor altogether. I stared out my office window at the gray sky. Was this revenge? Probably. Was it also smart investing? Arguably. In the end, what decided me wasn't anger. It was a memory of standing on my driveway, clutching my grocery bags, while Todd smirked and said, "You have no idea who you're messing with." Maybe he was right. Maybe he had no idea. The tax lien auction was held in a stuffy meeting room at the county building. I took the morning off work, dressed in business casual like I belonged there. Dozens of older guys in polo shirts and baseball caps milled around, chatting about last year's yields and that church property on Elm. I checked in, got my bidder number, and sat down. Todd's property was about halfway down the list. When the clerk finally called his parcel number, I felt my pulse in my ears. Opening bid is $9,740.56, she said. Do I hear 9,740? I raised my paddle. Bid from number 42, she said. Do I hear 9,720? No one else moved. Most investors were there for bigger fish, commercial properties, vacant land they could flip, entire portfolios of abandoned houses. A shabby owner-occupied ranch in a non-trendy neighborhood wasn't exciting. Going once, going twice, the clerk said. Sold to bidder 42. The gavel tapped. Just like that, I was the lien holder on Todd's property. The clerk handed me a packet. Owner has 1 year from today to redeem, she said. If they don't, you can begin the process to apply for a tax deed. Instructions are in the packet. Any questions, call the treasurer's office. I walked out into the sunlight, the packet heavy in my hands. I half expected lightning to strike. Instead, my phone buzzed with an email from work about a spreadsheet. Life went on. For almost a year, nothing changed. On the surface, Underneath, a slow clock ticked. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done at first. Not even Maya. I made the required follow-up filings, logged my payment in a spreadsheet, and tucked the certificate into a fireproof folder. I still had to live next to Todd for at least another year. In some ways, things got quieter. Maybe he'd run out of steam. Maybe he'd realized towing was an option and stopped fully blocking me. He still occasionally nudged his truck too close, but the Ring camera seemed to keep him in check. He still muttered under his breath when we passed each other. Still made passive-aggressive comments about how some people don't understand neighborly give and take. But the open warfare simmered down into a cold mutual dislike. I threw myself into house projects, painting, gardening, replacing that awful carpet. I went on dates. I traveled. Sometimes I even forgot for an afternoon that I'd technically held the fate of Todd's house in a bright orange certificate. Then, about 11 months after the auction, I got a letter from the county. Notice of right to apply for tax deed. My heart sped up as I read. Owner had not redeemed. No payments had been made toward the delinquent taxes. As lien holder, I could now start the process to obtain a tax deed, subject to additional costs and notifications. I called the treasurer's office to confirm. "Are you sure?" I asked. "He hasn't paid anything?" The clerk looked it up. "Balance is still outstanding," she said. "We sent multiple notices. No response." I thought about all the Amazon boxes I'd seen on Todd's porch over the past year. The new rims on his truck. The fireworks he'd lit off in the street on the 4th of July. I thought about him laughing, "You don't know who you're messing with." I filled out the application. It took another 3 months, public notices in the newspaper, certified letters, a hearing date. Todd either ignored them or didn't understand. The day the county issued the tax deed, I stood in line at the recorder's office, checkbook in hand for the final fees. The clerk stamped a document and slid it across the counter. "Congratulations," she said. "You are now the owner of record for 1483 Willow Lane." Todd's address. My neighbor's house. The one with the too short driveway and the rusted trailer, and the man who thought my property existed for his convenience. I walked out of the building in a daze. When I got home, I sat on my couch and stared at the deed. Ownership is a strange feeling. When I'd bought my own house, it had felt joyful. Proud. This felt heavier. I wasn't just gaining property. I was gaining responsibility. And, in a very real way, power over someone who'd been a thorn in my side for 2 years. I didn't want to abuse that. I did, however, want to make sure he never parked in my driveway again. Legally, getting a tax deed didn't mean the sheriff immediately dragged Todd's furniture to the curb. In my state, a tax deed gave me title, but any existing occupants had to be removed through a standard eviction or ejectment process. I could choose to offer him a rental agreement. Or I could choose to have him leave. Part of me liked the idea of making him pay rent to me. Of codifying in writing that he had to respect my property, this time including a very specific clause about my driveway. Another part of me suspected that even with a contract, he'd test every boundary until I was right back in my old nightmare, only now as his landlord. After talking it through with a real estate attorney, because if there was ever a time to pay for good advice, this was a time, made a plan. Step 1, notify him. Step 2, offer him a fair market-rate rental agreement with clear rules. Step 3, if he refused, file for eviction with proper notice and timelines. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself. It was about setting boundaries. Really, really big, legally binding boundaries. The day I slipped the certified letter into his mailbox, my hands shook. The letter said in neutral language that, due to unpaid property taxes, the county had issued a tax deed to me. As the new owner of record, I was willing to offer him a 1-year lease at a specified rent, with conditions including no parking on my property, including my driveway, at any time. No harassment or trespassing. If he did not wish to enter into a lease, he had 60 days to vacate, after which I would pursue legal action to recover possession. I also attached a copy of the deed. No dramatic commentary. No remember when you blocked my garage? Jabs. Just facts. 48 hours later, there was a furious pounding on my front door. I checked the ring feed before opening. Todd stood there, face red, letter crumpled in his fist. I opened the door halfway, chain still on. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, waving the paper. "Hi, Todd," I said calmly. "Looks like you got my letter." "You think this is funny?" he demanded. "Some scam thing you printed off the internet? You don't own my house." "I do actually," I said. "You haven't paid your property taxes in years. The county sold the lien. I bought it. You had a chance to redeem. You didn't. So they issued a tax deed." He stared at me like I'd sprouted horns. "You can't just buy someone's house out from under them," he said. "You can," I said. "If they ignore every notice for 3 years." He shook his head violently. "I'll sue," he said. "I'll get a lawyer. You'll be sorry." "You're welcome to talk to a lawyer," I said. "They'll explain the process. In the meantime, you have 2 options: sign a lease and pay rent like anyone else, or use the 60 days to find a new place." He laughed, but there was a wobble in it. "I'm not paying you a damn cent," he spat. "I've been here 15 years. You've been here 5 minutes. You think some fancy paper changes that?" "Yes," I said simply. "That's literally what deeds are." His eyes flashed. "This is because of your precious driveway, isn't it?" he sneered. "Because you couldn't handle sharing like a normal neighbor. This is because you repeatedly disrespected my property, ignored requests, damaged my car, and harassed me," I said. "The driveway was just the start." This eye gestured toward the letteries, the consequence of ignoring boundaries. "But it's still your choice what happens next." He crumpled the paper further. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "You have no idea who you're messing with." He stormed off. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling shakily. Maya called 10 minutes later. "What's going on?" she asked. "Your heart rate monitor notification just popped up in our shared app. Are you running a marathon or fighting a bear?" I told her everything. There was a long silence. Then she said, "Remind me never to park in your spot." We both laughed. Underneath, my stomach churned. The clock was ticking. The next 2 months were a stalemate. Todd refused to sign the lease. He also refused to move. He stopped talking to me entirely, instead glowering whenever we crossed paths. He started parking his truck exactly on the property line, tires hugging the invisible border like he was daring me to say something. I didn't. I focused on my own life, work, friends, repainting my kitchen cabinets. I also documented every interaction or lack thereof. At the 45-day mark, I sent a reminder letter, hand-delivered and via certified mail, restating the move-out deadline. He ignored it. On day 61, my attorney filed for eviction. The court date was 6 weeks out. I wasn't trying to throw him on the street with no notice. But I also wasn't playing landlord-tenant limbo forever. The day of the hearing, Todd showed up without a lawyer. He wore a wrinkled button-down and jeans. I wore the same blazer I'd worn to my first job interview out of college. The judge, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, flipped through the file. "So, Mr. Harris," she said, using Todd's last name, "you understand that the property was sold at a tax lien auction and a deed was issued to Miss Patel after the statutory redemption period, correct?" Todd crossed his arms. "No one told me," he said. The judge raised an eyebrow. "The county records show multiple notices mailed to your address over a 3-year period," she said. "Additionally, Ms. Patel has provided copies of the certified letters she sent you regarding her intent to either offer a lease or seek possession." He scowled. "I've been in that house 15 years, he said. "My kids grew up there. She moved in next door 2 years ago and now she wants to kick me out. How is that fair?" The judge's gaze softened, but her voice stayed firm. "I understand that this is upsetting," she said. "However, property taxes fund essential services. when they're not paid, the law allows for tax sales. The time to contest this would have been during that process, not at an eviction hearing months later. She looked at me. Ms. Patel, you're seeking possession of the property, not back rent or damages, correct? She asked. That's correct, Your Honor, I said. I'm not asking for any money from him. I just want the property back. She nodded. The court finds that Ms. Patel is the lawful owner of the property at 1483 Willow Lane and that Mr. Harris has been given proper notice to vacate, she said. An order for possession will be granted. Mr. Harris, you have 14 days to move out. If you have not vacated by then, Ms. Patel may request assistance from the sheriff's office. Todd's face went almost purple. So that's it? He said. 15 years, gone because she wanted more parking? The judge sighed. That's it, she said. I suggest you use the next 2 weeks to focus on finding a new place rather than relitigating decisions that have already been made. Gavel. Done. Outside the courtroom, Todd stormed past me without a word. Maya, who'd come to support me, squeezed my hand. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me in 2 weeks. The day the sheriff's deputy arrived, I stayed home from work. A moving truck was already in Todd's driveway, friends and relatives hauling boxes. He'd waited until the last minute. The deputy, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, knocked on my door first. Ms. Patel? He asked. Just letting you know we're here to supervise. Looks like he's almost out. Thanks, I said, my stomach in knots. Part of me wanted to hide inside until it was over. Another part of me felt like I needed to see this through. I stepped onto my porch. Todd was carrying a box toward the truck. He saw me and stopped. For a moment, we just looked at each other. No yelling. No smirking. Just two people whose lives had collided in an ugly way. One of his friends, a guy about his age in a faded band t-shirt, came over and looked between us. So you're the one buying up the neighborhood, huh? He said to me, half accusatory, half impressed. Just the one house, I said softly. He nodded toward Todd. You know he had chances to fix this, he said under his breath. He just didn't. I didn't respond. After another hour, the deputy signaled that they were done. Todd walked up to me slowly. He held out a set of keys. For a second, I thought he might throw them at me. Instead, he opened his hand. I hope you're happy, he said quietly. I thought about my keyed car door. The stuck nights. The sticky notes crumpled on my stoop. He snorted. You're colder than you look, he said. Guess I shouldn't have messed with the banker. Financial analyst, I corrected automatically. He shook his head, a humorless laugh. Whatever, he said. Enjoy the house. He dropped the keys into my palm and walked away. The truck pulled off. The deputy nodded at me, then left. And just like that, the chapter of Todd, my driveway stealing neighbor, was over. Owning 2 houses on the same street felt strange. I didn't move into Todd's old place. I loved my smaller bungalow and had no desire to share walls with the ghost of his bad behavior. Instead, after cleaning it up and making a few repairs while loudly parking my car squarely in my driveway, and only my driveway, I listed it for rent. I vetted tenants carefully. Single moms, young couples, retirees. In the end, I chose a divorced nurse named Carla and her teenage son. At our first meeting, she said, I want a quiet place. No drama. Just somewhere to come home to after night shifts. I smiled. I can promise quiet, I said. And I'm pretty motivated to keep the driveway situation clear. She laughed, not knowing the whole story. I wrote a very clear clause into the lease. Tenant and guests shall park only in the driveway and garage located on the leased premises or on the public street, and shall not block or use the adjacent property's driveway or yard for parking at any time. The first month she lived there, Carla brought me brownies. Thank you for taking a chance on us, she said. You've been the easiest landlord I've ever had. I thought about Todd calling me cold. Maybe I was, in that one instance. But kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-erasure. Now, when I pull into my driveway after a long day, there is no truck blocking my way. No neighbor yelling that I don't understand how things work around here. Just my little house, my driveway, my peace. Sometimes, when I take out the trash and see Carla's car neatly parked in her driveway, we wave at each other. Neighbors. The way it should have been from the start. People ask me, when they hear the story, if I feel guilty. I think about the 15 notices the county sent. The conversations, the tolerance, the chances I gave him to be decent. The way he weaponized assumptions about normal neighborly behavior to treat my property like his overflow parking lot. I think about how many times women are told to just let it go, don't escalate, don't make a big deal. Then I think about the heavy thunk of the deed on my coffee table, and the lightness I felt the first time I pulled into my empty driveway and turned off the engine without stress. Do I feel guilty? I feel my neighbor parked in my driveway until I bought his house. He thought owning the street meant ignoring property lines. I showed him what real ownership looks like. Not because I wanted to ruin his life, but because I finally understood that my peace was worth fighting bidding for.